retired Brigadier General Robert Spalding. He's a retired U.S. Air Force. He's a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, focusing on U.S.-China relations, economic and national security, and is the author of a must-read book, Stealth War, How China Took Over While America's Elite Slept. General Spalding, you heard this clip. I mean, people in America are looking at this in disbelief that a thug group can take over 6 city blocks, and the mayor calls them patriots. General, what is going on in America?
Well, I'm reminded of April 12th, 1861, when a Major Robert Anderson was defending Fort Sumter, and, the first shots of the Confederacy were fired at that, and eventually the fort surrendered. This is the beginning of armed insurrection, and it's unacceptable, and it needs to be stopped.
Define armed insurrection. Define that, General. That's a pretty demonstrative statement.
When you start imposing a law other than the prevailing law, right, the law of the United States and the law of the states, then you have essentially had an armed insurrection. They are putting walls around that neighborhood. They are essentially declaring it, sovereign territory of whatever Antifa or whatever the organization is. That is the definition of armed insurrection.
If you were advising, obviously the mayor of Seattle, Mayor Jen, is supporting it. She called it patriotism.
Well, think about, when Fort Sumter was attacked, so did the governor and the local politicians support that armed insurrection. So, just because they're supporting it doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it constitutional. I'm sorry, but the police chief is correct.
So the mayor's not going to do anything. The governor's not going to do anything, just like South Carolina and Fort Sumter. They're supporting this, I guess, thug takeover of 6 city blocks with businesses there and homes there. And they're supporting mafia-style extortion and people walking around with guns and building walls. They're supporting this. They're cheering it. The New York Times, General, called it a cross between a street festival and a commune. What country do I live in?
Guns. Neither one of those have guns. So, it's an armed commune or an armed street festival, either one of which, when they start checking IDs and start erecting barriers, they are essentially saying that the law no longer applies. And the law in the United States, the law is the Constitution, and you can't have another law in the United States. That can't happen.
So, General, average people are watching this on television, and the New York Times can make believe it doesn't happen, and it's a street festival like you're going to go in there and buy a cannoli, okay? Or the mayor or the governor, Inslee. By the way, this guy ran for president. Inslee asked about it, said he doesn't know anything about it, he hadn't heard of it. It's all over the news. You'd have to be an imbecile not to have heard of it. Of course he's heard of it, so he lied. And then you got the mayor cheering them on. I guess she's going to send them food, and they've got a list of demands, and she's going to acquiesce. And now they're saying they're going to do the same thing in Portland, and I guess expand it for Tacoma, and then I guess San Diego. I don't know where. Chesapeake, Virginia. I don't know what they're going to do, but the president says you got to take your city back now. If you don't, I will. What does that mean, sir?
Well, I think that means exactly what he says it means. Just like Lincoln dealt with the Confederacy, the president's going to have to deal with this insurrection.
So what does he do? If the mayor, like in South Carolina, if you want to take that example of Fort Sumter, I hadn't thought of that. Great example. Mayor of Charleston backed it. Governor backed it. Legislators backed it. Everybody cheered him on. Lincoln came in and took federal action. Okay, so what does Trump do?
So he can either activate the National Guard or bring in federal troops. Either one, or he has the authority to do so as the commander-in-chief. That's his job.
Doesn't the National Guard...
Very plain in the Constitution. That's its job.
General, isn't the National Guard responsible to the governor?
That's under Title 32. In times, the president can activate them under Title 10 of U.S. law. and the National Guard becomes military, just like I was when I was on active duty. No difference.
So you think that President Trump should do Title 10, activate the National Guard or the U.S. military, and simply go in there and clear them out regardless of what it takes?
Absolutely.
And basically
No
liberate those 6 blocks, because if I own a business there, I'm being extorted. I mean, the police chief look, her hands are tied. I get a lot of text here mad at the police chief. The police chief
it's
serves.
Not her job.
She's
clearly not her job.
Right. She serves at the pleasure of city council and the mayor. I mean, she has to do what they say. That's what a police chief does. They serve at the pleasure of the city council, the elected officials. And they told her to get out of there. So she did what she had to do. So it's not really her fault. And I mean, she's in a box because she says, if you're being extorted, file a police report. Well, the police can't get in there. So what? I mean, it's like, I can't believe this. And then the fake news media is cheering them on like this is some kind of great protest thing. And they're extorting people like the mafia does. This is unbelievable. Well, what if you own a business there? What if you went there to go shopping to buy a latte or something and you can't get out?
It's common sense. I mean, there really is no debate here. The president clearly has authority, and he has more importantly, he has the obligation to assert the supremacy of the Constitution in all areas of the United States. You can't have something that is undermining the Constitution anywhere. And quite frankly, that's what military swear to support and defend, is the Constitution. And in this case, when you have another law being imposed in an area that's governed by the United States, that's armed insurrection and has to be put down.
And so you would advise the president to call the National Guard with tanks and just clear them out, right? Whatever it takes?
Well, I don't think that requires tanks, but certainly if there's armed people there, then they have to be dealt with appropriately.
So define dealt with. If you're the president, you're sitting there, you're going to rally in Tulsa. I mean, these people are entrenched in there, and they're bold, and they're saying they're going to expand. So what do? I mean, if you go in there, what do you do?
Well,
shoot spitballs at them?
This is what the Army is trained to do. This is what the Marines are trained to do. They do it all the time. They do it professionally. It's not rocket science, right? This is not complicated. Go and restore law and order. That's what they did. They did that in Iraq and Afghanistan many times over. Many times they'd go in and restore order, and then, of course, they'd turn around and something like this would happen again. Mm-hmm. So they'd go back in and clean it up. So, I mean, we're not talking about something that they're not trained to do. Mm-hmm. So and to the extent that those protesters are using lethal force, and then, they have to be dealt with.
We're with retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General Robert Spalding. General, did you ever think in your lifetime you would see what we're seeing now in these 6 blocks in Seattle? Really?
Actually, I believe this was coming, and it's something that I've been watching for a while. It's not fully related just to the United States. It's actually coming from outside the United States. The Russians, the Chinese now are participating in undermining our democracy. It's been going on for a long time. This idea that we don't have equality of economic opportunity in the United States, that was driven by our policy with regard to China and the destruction of the working class in this country done by China. And so we're now reaping the fruits of policies that both the right and the left have imposed on, the working class of this nation. And so I'm not surprised at all. I expected this. And I guess what's surprising to me is it's happened so quickly. At least people now can see what's happening for their own eyes.
So if the president acts as you're suggesting, and we're with Brigadier General retired Robert S. Spalding, U.S. Air Force Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute. So, General Spalding, if the president acts in accordance with your suggestion, which is basically this is the beginning of an armed insurrection, and it has to be eradicated and dealt with now by whatever means necessary. What is his risk of just, media bashing him, public relations, if, something goes down? But I guess what you're saying is that really isn't the consideration here. You just have to do what you have to do, right?
He put his hand on the Bible. He raised his right hand, just like I did, to support and defend the Constitution. It's his job. That's the bottom line.
There's a Democratic House candidate in Washington State running. She's a leading Democratic candidate in a very close House race. And she said yesterday, this is Kim Olson. She said, if people loot, so what? Burn it to the ground. This is a person running for Congress in the United States, Kim Olson, in a swing district. She says, let it burn. She's a retired Air Force colonel. She did this during a live digital event on Tuesday. So she was in the Air Force, and her position is looting is okay, and let them loot and burn it down.
That's clearly not, if she was a colonel in the Air Force, she obviously doesn't understand the oath of office.
But see, I bring that up to you, General, to make the point to our audience where we are right now in this country. During Obama, this is only 5-6 years ago, right? 4 years ago, when Obama was president, Joe Biden was vice president. If they had a leading Democratic candidate running for Congress who said, loot the cities, burn them down, it's okay, white America deserves it. That's basically what she said. They deserve this. She would get 9%. Obama would blast her, and that would be the end of this person for life, right? But in today's environment, she goes ahead in the polls. She's likely to be their nominee in that district and be the favorite to win. How did we get here?
So when you take away economic opportunity, in which we've done in this country, when you destroy all hope for the American dream, which we've done in this country, and then you have this ability that both the Russians and the Chinese Communist Party have, which is to flood social media with messages that support this kind of activity. You essentially have the breakdown of democracies all over the world. And that's what's going on. That's why, by the way, the Chinese created the Great Firewall. That's why the Russians have unplugged from the internet. It's their ability to stand behind, their very controlling systems and fire at democracies at will. And so in the case of the Chinese, we lost 70,000 factories. That's 70,000 communities destroyed in this country. Mm-hmm. I told people when I was at the White House, look at Dresden, Germany, after 8th Air Force got done with them, and then go look at Detroit, Michigan today. It's mm-hmm. no different. Mm-hmm. It's no different. Mm-hmm. And that's why the American people have this unspecified anxiety, and that's why I wrote my book, to explain what was going on. This is not, some isolated incident. This has been growing, mm-hmm. and it's been growing because neither the right or the left have been taking care of the working class of this country, mm-hmm. and it's allowed this to grow and fester, and it's time to clean it up, and we need to clean it up.
General Spalding, I want to thank you for your time today. As soon as this went down in Seattle, this is a true story. As soon as I saw it happening, I'm like, I got to get General Spalding on to try to make sense of this. And thank you for being so accessible to us, General. I really appreciate it. And so do our listeners, sir. Thank you.